Hello, welcome back to PennFuture's series on data centers. My name is Emma Bast. I am a staff attorney at PennFuture out of our Philadelphia office. PennFuture is a member-supported nonprofit environmental organization that strives to protect Pennsylvania's air, water, and land, and to empower citizens to build sustainable communities for future generations. My work focuses on water quality, stormwater management, and energy issues. And as a reminder, this is part of PennFuture's ongoing series on data centers. Today, we will be focusing on energy use and power use in them, but this data centers are facilities that house computing infrastructure that IT systems require. And there are many different kinds of data centers. Today, we are going to be focusing on what goes on in those called hyperscalers, the data centers that tend to house AI facilities. But do remember from our earlier videos that AI and the cloud are only sort of virtual. These facilities exist somewhere in the physical world. So we're going to be talking today about what really drives the energy use in them. You've probably seen some headlines about power and data centers or AI and energy consumption or energy demand. How much are we really looking at? Well, in 2023, data centers consumed about 4.4% of total US electricity. In the same year, 2023, all residential use in the country consumed about 15% of total US electricity. Data centers that demand is expected to rise. Data centers are expected to consume approximately 6 to 12% of total US electricity by 2028. A brief caveat, these numbers are totals. Individual use for a particular data center often varies, and it's usually difficult to find out exact numbers for each facility. It might be protected as business information because some can be more energy efficient, some less. That might be part of their business model. So we're really talking today at a high level of generality. So back to our fundamental question, why is so much power used? Well, the short answer is it takes a lot of energy to run all these computers, whether it's the hyperscaler or even just a regular data center, but really for the hyperscalers, each machine must run a huge number of calculations and processes for every stage of its function. Generative AI in particular, the things chat GPTs, the things you use to write emails, the image generators, have to run a tremendous number of calculations each and every time they're asked to generate something. So every time it does, it takes a lot of energy to do it. And again, that's really at every step of the process, starting from the initial training process for the model, getting all of the data and all of that into the system and making the model work, the fine tuning of the model, generating tokens once the model's being used, running the model itself, and completion, getting to a completion. Each of those requires energy and it's consumed at every step. So how do these models work and what is really driving that energy consumption? Let's get into it. How natural language model AIs work. And natural language model, that's the term for AIs that work like conversation. That's things like ChatGPT that you might be familiar with. They generate text that is likely to follow from a particular prompt, aka the thing that you type into the text box. Generative AI models take in the prompt. This could be a few words, a few paragraphs, or a few pages. Using a compounding process, they produce out a single token based on the data that is put into the model. So they figure out what is likely to follow. And so a token, what does that mean? Tokens are key. Tokens are a chunk of text. Models have a limit on the maximum number of tokens that they can carry. Individual letters don't carry as much information. If you're thinking about watching Wheel of Fortune, if someone guesses an I or a T or an S, it doesn't really tell you what letter comes after it unless you've got a little more context. But there are too many whole words in the dictionary to be put into these models. So tokens are the Goldilocks solution. Tokens are common, it's a number of a chunk of letters, a chunk of text. So common and short words typically correspond to a single token, like the word uses in this example. Longer or less common words, like the word generative in this example, are broken into several tokens. So then the model takes in your prompt, it breaks it into these tokens, and then it starts crunching the numbers. What text is likely to come after whatever the prompt was? What tokens follow these tokens? Let's look at what that looks like. So on the screen, we've got kind of a hypothetical set of boxes here. So when you put in your prompt, it gets broken up into tokens. Then the model thinks about what is likely to follow those particular tokens, and it uses an iterative process. So it spits out one token, one little chunk of text. Then that token gets fed back into the original prompt. And then that creates a new token, one that incorporates the original prompt. And that process will continue until it reaches completion. And the completion is what happens at the very end when it thinks that it has reached sort of the end of what is likely to follow from the original prompt. So if we had asked what is at the start of the Gettysburg Address, that particular instance, that particular completion might come up with 77 years ago and say, this is the most likely output. Now, what does it mean to be likely? The definition of likely is sort of complex, but for these purposes, we can think of it as text that is similar to text in the training data that often follows something that was like in what was in the prompt. Models like the ones used by ChatGPT are trained on very large volumes of text scraped from the internet, and it's this data that influences the model's predictions. It influences the outcomes. So different sets of data might have ultimately different outcomes. A sidebar note on image generation is that image generators do work a little bit differently to generate individual pixels. Because they use pixels instead of tokens, they require more energy than text generation because the individual pixels don't carry as much predictive power. And so if you look here at this kind of high level concept, we have some highly pixelated, vague information here on the most left. In the middle, we have a somewhat pixelated heart. And then over on the right, you've got a really glossy looking heart. But it takes a lot more energy to get to that glossy heart. So again, going back to where we started, why is so much energy used? The initial training process, getting all that information into the model, scraping it all off the internet, putting it all in, running everything, making it be cohesive, fine-tuning the model, again, going through all of the data, that initial input and building process takes a lot of energy. Whenever you use a generative AI, it has to break what you put into it into those tokens or break it into the pixels. It has to run the model with the compounding set of information where it feeds back into itself, and then it has to reach that completion. Energy is used at every step. How much power are we really talking here? Well, a single ChatGPT conversation uses as much electricity as charging your phone, and generating an image consumes about an entire bottle of water for cooling all of those computers from all that process. So, and as we talked about before, that really adds up and is presenting a very large strain on our energy grid. Can it be better? Is it possible to correct this? Yes, that's the good news. There are many proposed ways to do this that are available to developers and our policymakers. They can limit the amount of power that's available to the machines. They can choose more efficient hardware, rethink how model training works, focus on task-specific models rather than these generalized ones that have a much higher energy demand. They can even make software AI and carbon aware so that it begins to self-teach itself to be more efficient. These are just some of the many proposals that are out there. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, data centers and AI are likely to increase stress and energy demands on our power grid. But state level policy can be implemented to increase the amount of reliable, low cost energy sources, such as solar and storage, that can be built in only months to quickly respond to these rising energy demands. And there are opportunities to advocate for other policy that make sure that our grid stays reliable and that energy costs and these cost of this increased demand aren't shifted to the individual ratepayers. Thank you for joining us. Please check out the other videos in our series about data centers, about their usage, the economics, what municipalities can do to prepare. We appreciate your time. And again, thank you for joining PennFuture for our series on data centers.